Hello, I am Markéta Svobodová from RespON, a registered association that co-organizes the conference called Dobroudržitelná konference within the week of or for climate that takes place in the whole Czech Republic. And now I would like to welcome a researcher, Nikolina Mileva. Hello, Nikolina.
Hello.
Is a research fellow at the European Space Agency near Rome, Italy, and originally she is from Bulgaria, and she has a master's degree in geography from Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and also she is a PhD candidate in climate and environmental sciences at the University of Augsburg in Germany. In her research, she analyzes Earth satellite images and climate models to gain insight into climate change besides other environmental topics. So really interesting focus of the research, or at least interested also for our conference and hopefully for all the ones who are participating. So now let's go to the questions. So firstly, in Bulgaria, you studied business economics, as I got to know. So would you say maybe it pays off to mitigate climate change when we use the economic words?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say if it pays off because if you ask this question, it means you have to put price on things. And there are some things such as biodiversity or even human life that it's very difficult to put a price tag on that. So I'm not sure if it pays off, but I think we're morally obliged to do something for climate change and for climate adaptation.
So it pays off anyway. Even
yeah, we have to do it.
Yeah, I agree. So when we go to the land use changes, like for example, Amazon rainforest, but also in Europe, what do you think like implications for climate does this have?
Let's start with the Amazon forest because I think it's the more interesting region. So in the Amazon forest, major land use change that we have is forests being converted to grasslands and to agricultural areas, but mostly grasslands because grasslands then are used for the cattle to feed on. And of course, when we compare forests, they can capture much more CO2 compared to grasslands. So when we remove those forests, they're most of the time they're just burned. So that carbon that they're storing is directly released into the atmosphere. And carbon and other greenhouse gases, they have this ability to mix very well with the atmosphere and very fast. So CO2 that's released over the Amazon forest within 1-2 weeks, it's spread out globally. So yeah, that's why it's very important to try to preserve the Amazon forest because at the end it has impact on the global climate. And well, in Europe, we don't have deforestation on such a large scale, although we still have some deforestation going on. For example, there are some managed forests where wood is viewed as a commodity. So basically you cut some trees, you sell the wood, then you plant some new trees. And there are some studies on the climate effects of such kind of forest management. And but the climate effect, of course, depends on the stage at which the forest is. If it's just freshly cut, or if there are already some older trees present. But yeah, the impact is rather neutral, let's say. But yeah, we also have a lot of logging of the so-called sanitation logging. For example, when you have some forests that are infested with the bark beetle, and then in order to prevent further spread of the bark beetle, then some of the forests are cut. And we know that with climate change, with warming climate, these bark beetles they reproduce even faster. So that's gonna be even bigger problem in future. So yeah, that's one kind of land use change that's happening in Europe.
And is it the only way how to prevent it? The trees are cut, Or is there any other way which you know about, which could also prevent the spread of those insects or animals which we don't want to have in the forest?
Yeah, well, I'm not aware of any other methods. I know that some forest management authorities they have kind of a different approach. They just say, okay, we let things happen naturally, and then they just let the forest be infested with this bark beetle, and eventually it stops somewhere because of, let's say, seasonal change or other factors. But it's difficult to say what is the right solution. Let things happen naturally or intervene and cut some trees. I think it's still not clear.
Yeah, and it's really current topic, so we will see how it evolves in the near future, definitely. And if we now go to the current work you are doing regarding investigating biodiversity, you use satellite images. So can you explain to us, like, how does it work? How are those satellite images used?
Yes. In general, measuring biodiversity is still open question in science. There is no one way to measure biodiversity. So what's usually done, so we have a lot of satellite images from different sensors, and a lot of people calculate some vegetation indices. And those vegetation indices, they are based on the different channels that the satellite images have. For example, if we take a picture with our phone, the picture contains the blue, green, and red band. With satellite images, it's similar. So they have these bands. They have also, let's say, often they have the near infrared band, but also many other, because the optical sensors that we have on board on satellites, they can be much more advanced than human eyes, and they can therefore see some patterns that we cannot observe with the naked eye. And using these vegetation indices, we can estimate different vegetation properties. There are many vegetation properties that we can estimate, for example, chlorophyll content, carotenoid content, water content of leaves, leaf area. So maybe I just skip one example with the leaf area index. So that's the area of green leaves per square meter. And having this estimate, we know basically how much green vegetation there is on the Earth's surface. And usually it's the green part of plants that is photosynthetically active. And by knowing the area of the leaves, we can estimate how much CO2 is consumed by vegetation. And then, of course, this has some impacts on climate. But also, in terms of biodiversity, it's interesting because, plants, for photosynthesis, they need CO2. And they get CO2 from the atmosphere through some little openings called stomata. And also through the same openings, they also can release water to cool down. And when we have a higher concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, they need to open these openings, the stomata, just a little bit, and they can get already quite a high amount of CO2 while not losing too much water. Because if they open too much the stomata, then they will lose too much water. And it's an important mechanism for plants to adjust to some drier conditions. And we know that one of the impacts of climate change is that some places, basically dry places, will become drier and wet places will become wetter. So yeah, that's one way to track how vegetation changes. Also some plants that are more drought resistant will adapt and thrive, and we can observe that from space. some that are not resistant or cannot adjust to these new conditions will die out or move to new habitats. So that's just a small example, but there are many more.
Mm-hmm. So maybe except of this example which you mentioned, why is biodiversity and checking it, through these satellite images important for us, for humans, which other ways do you see the importance of it? In which other ways is it important for us humans?
Satellite images?
Yes, for diversity, for biodiversity.
Yeah. For biodiversity? Yeah, of course, there are many different things that we can track. So one thing is, as we mentioned, the composition of plants. So other things would be, for example, could be related to agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
That's an aspect that's often, let's say overlooked, but I think it's gaining more attention because right now we have these monocultures where you basically have one type of plant that's planted over vast areas. And there are some approaches that suggest, maybe it's not that good to have these monocultures, but maybe it's better to have 2, 3 or more cultures together, because it has been proven in scientific research that more diverse ecosystems are more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually something that one of my colleagues I'm sharing office with is working on resilience of ecosystems. And that's something that we can also observe with satellite images by taking some time series of vegetation indices that I mentioned previously. We can measure the resilience of forests and some other ecosystems, such as agricultural ecosystems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if we go to the more higher level, maybe, why is biodiversity so important for humans? Maybe you can explain to our viewers.
Yeah, it's important because it's important for ecosystems because it makes ecosystems more resilient. And ecosystems provide services for us, ecosystem services. And these services are things like clean water, for example, because plants have this ability to, let's say, purify water because they basically take water from the soil, which might be contaminated, but then this water is evaporated through the leaves and then it falls down as rain. And this rain is already purified because the plants have absorbed some of the harmful substances that were found in the groundwater. So, that's one lecosystem service that we get from biodiversity, from vegetation in general. Mm-hmm. And I would mention again agriculture, because if we have for example, a big drought and agricultural yields are affected, then this will drive prices of food, and it will really affect our everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And if you look at other changes that we can see, because this would be some effect in prices, for example. But if you look, for example, at nature, or how would you say we, as normal people, can recognize changes in biodiversity versus, for example, how scientists who can use other techniques, how to recognize those changes?
Well, changes are, I'd say, difficult to observe because some of these changes happen over long periods of time, much longer than a human life. And I think because of that, much of the biodiversity research is concentrated on describing particular patterns that you can observe. For example, you can observe a particular ecosystem and say, the biodiversity is high or low. But saying how this changed over time, it's not that easy because it can take many centuries. And partially we also don't have the data because, for example, satellite data we have, let's say reliable satellite data we have since the late 60s, 80s. And satellite data allows us to have this global coverage of land. Otherwise, we just rely on some local measurements, which are not complete, of course. So yeah, at the end, it's also lack of data. So it's not that easy to observe those changes.
It's really difficult to recognize. But then, for example, bees, it's already now in, some documentaries that people who are, for example, really focused on bees, they can see it already now. So maybe just some people who are very much into one topic and can just see a little bit. And if you look at the research...
Yes, indeed. The pollinators, that's probably one of the most famous or well-known examples of an ecosystem service, because that's a very good example for an ecosystem service. And yeah, if we don't have bees, then it can basically fail our whole agriculture supply chain.
Exactly. And now if you look at the research and artificial intelligence, it's like now already, the conferences, like research conferences, are full of artificial intelligence these days, and it's also in business and everywhere. In your opinion, how can artificial intelligence help the research, or how can it harm actually the climate as such, because it consumes a lot of, energy? So, what is your opinion about this topic, like the pros and cons in regard to climate change and also the climate-related research?
Well, indeed, we're running all these machine learning models is most running on some supercomputers, and they do have their carbon footprint. We cannot avoid that for now. But I think the added value that such models can give us is larger than the carbon footprint that create. So while there are some dangers, I'm pretty much in favor. And indeed, in climate science, there are a lot of developments that are related to machine learning and artificial intelligence in general. Just to give an example, recently there was climate model that was released by NASA and IBM. It's a new type of climate model that's based entirely on machine learning, because traditionally climate models they basically described our whole planet Earth with some equations. They describe the land, the oceans, the atmosphere, how they interact with some equations that are solved. But in machine learning, basically they plug in data from the climate models as a training data, and then they come up with this kind of emulator, machine learning emulator, which is actually quite beneficial, because running climate models is actually also computationally very expensive. You have to run them on supercomputers. They also have, as we mentioned, a huge carbon footprint. But by using these machine learning emulators, then you can run some scenarios on pre-trained machine learning models. So then you have the results within seconds on your local machine. So that's already a huge improvement.
And can you recommend any resources about climate change except of those you mentioned for general audience? Maybe including some maps as well. You have something as a tip?
I can always suggest to anyone the IPCC reports. Of course, they are scientific reports, but they have also very nice overviews. And in the recent years, they really put a lot of effort to make the data more accessible to the general public. So they provide some nice graphics and animations. So it's always worth it to take a look at the IPSS website. Another source that I also often recommend is the Carbon Brief. They have also some, it's kind of a mix between science and politics, because, politics plays a big role in climate science, for good or for bad. So I think it's important to know also about the political developments in this area. So I'll say these are two good resources to start with.
Great. Thank you very much. IPCC reports are really long reading, but also nice graphics. So definitely it's good to know about. And the second will also be useful, definitely. So thank you very much. Thank you for the whole interview and good luck in your research. And hopefully there will be more good news to come, not just bad news in the future. So thank you very much. Thank you. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you.